This was a doozy. This went mega viral here. This was an interview between Piers Morgan and Bassem Youssef, who is an Egyptian satirist and comedian and television personality. And we're going to play the tail end of the interview. This was about a 30-minute interview. It was extremely well done on Youssef's part, but it did have to do with Youssef litigating the claims of Ben Shapiro on a previous episode of the Piers Morgan show. So this is the clip in question, and then we will get to the litigation of that on the Piers Morgan show.
Frankly, I don't believe in proportionate response to terrorism. I believe that the way that you stop terrorism is with wildly disproportionate response. That doesn't mean in terms of targeting civilians. It means in terms of killing as many terrorists as humanly possible and allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement by hiding behind civilians in areas that they're supposedly responsible for means that the only option for Israel is to surrender to Hamas's hatred of its own citizens, its willingness to use its own children as human shields. No country worth its salt could ever do that.
Okay, so that was what Youssef was referencing. So Piers played that piece again. Now we're going to hear Jeremy Boring, who is, COO of the Daily Wire, some higher up at the Daily Wire, basically Ben Shapiro's business partner.
He runs the Daily Wire.
Okay. Here is Jeremy Boring sharing a panel with Bassem Youssef talking about Ben Shapiro's position, and then Bassem will come in.
I do wonder whether Israel, in its blind fury, which I completely understand, has thought through the consequences of actually launching a full air, ground and sea offensive into Gaza as to actually what happens at the end of that.
Well, I suppose Israel wasn't really given the opportunity to fully contemplate what the consequences of that action might be, because Israel didn't instigate this war. This war was instigated by a horrible terrorist attack on Israel. And a state is put in a position where it has to respond. Now, one might argue that the very fact that Israel has yet to actually launch their ground invasion means that they are actually making a calculation about what the cost will be, what victory looks like. Any rational person, any decent person can engage in a conversation about what is the appropriate response for Israel. Of course they can. But this sort of moral equivalency thing, I don't think is a sign of decency to engage in a conversation about moral equivalency.
Let me bring Bassem back in. You've been listening to this, Bassem. What's your response to what Jeremy's been saying?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the gentleman's name.
It's Jeremy Boring. He's the chief executive of the Daily Wire and co-founder with Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire.
Hi, Jeremy. Please say hello to Ben Shapiro, and please tell him that I do think he is the smartest person to ever walk the earth. Thank you so much. So, as a response to Jeremy, I agree with everything you said. I mean, what is disproportionate? I mean, he just used the examples from Second World War and America, showing that civilian casualty is, I heard his voice. He was very sad, and as he was telling us, it is so inevitable to kill so many civilians because it's something that we cannot avoid. I hear the sadness in his voice. And I know
he's good. He's got such good sarcasm and such deadpan. You latch on to the fact that Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring are like the two, least emotional sounding people in the world when they talk. I could hear it in your voice. He was he was devastated talking about civilian casualties.
Well, and you can see Boring here.
He knows he's getting fucked with. He knows he's getting fucked with.
Yeah, and this really does show. We talked about this offline. I love me a good Babylon Bee article taking the piss out of the liberal class, but in the end, there's a reason that we're not on the right. It'd be a lot easier to just kind of have a business plan where the end game is to get a contract with the Daily Wire, right?
Right. Complain about Snow White enough until you get a phone call.
That's it. And come on, Shapiro would love us, man. Two Jews. If we went right wing, I give it 12 months, we'd be on the Daily Wire.
Oh yeah, because we're Jews. we are funny Jews, and his whole career is based on the fact that he is an unfunny Jew.
He's very unfunny. Yes, he didn't get the funny gene, that one.
No.
But you look at him, and yeah, man. I mean, I have appreciated some of the mockery that the Daily Wire has done. Like they've done some funny ads and some funny genuinely funny stuff, taking the piss out of some of the culture war stances of the liberal class. But in the end, it doesn't mean these people fundamentally have a sense of humor. You know, it's very easy to make fun of people that would feel like they have to do Snow White but not white. I mean, that's an easy joke to make.
Yeah, it's low-hanging fruit.
It's very low-hanging fruit. But this, you could see having that lens turned on him, having him be made to look ridiculous. He doesn't take that very well. Look at his face.
He's very mopey and bitchy. Yeah,
exactly. He's a little bitch in the end. He can dish it out, but he can't take it.
Can't take it, exactly.
That it's a very difficult decision to kill all of these civilians because that's for a higher cause. And I understand, but my question, I have two questions. The question is, how can you justify the killing in the West Bank where Hamas does not exist? And if the disproportionate response during over all of these years have actually worked, what will be new this time that did not happen before? I just want to...
Okay, so he's holding up the chart there, which we showed a few streams back, of Palestinian casualties, meaning injuries and deaths, versus Israeli casualties, and making a very profound point. Hey, if you're insisting that a disproportionate response is justified, as Shapiro was, well, then why are you still having this problem? Because you've certainly been killing and maiming more people in Gaza than people in Gaza have been killing and maiming Israelis. So why hasn't this solved itself if your theory of the case is so good? What all of this just goes to expose, in some conversations more than others, is that the plan all along, from Israel's standpoint, was to swallow the Palestinian state. If that means killing everyone, they're willing to do that. If it means driving them out, they're willing to do that as well. But then that presents, that second option presents the logistical problem of where did they go, and also the fear of what do they do when they're gone, because they don't want to be driven off their land, right? And so, they don't have an answer. This fucking guy doesn't have an answer to that. And this guy is he's clearly so ignorant of the history. Boring even says, I'm not really familiar with the history of this. Well, if you're not familiar with the history of this, why did you volunteer to share a segment with an Egyptian who has family in Gaza? Like the arrogance of that.
Well, I was talking, this is a little bit of a side note, but I thought it was pretty interesting. I was talking to an African-American woman about how a lot of Jews keep tagging her and other black people in her circle with their stand with Israel things, as if they're obligated to stand. And she said what we said. Who do you think we identify with more?
Right. Yeah.
Like a colonized people being pushed off their land, or the people who are bombing them?
Right.
But we'll get into it Friday with the Amy Schumer post. A lot of them want to, obviously with somebody like Jeremy Boring, they haven't been standing with BLM. But, elite liberal Jews who had the whole BLM in their bio are now turning to these communities and saying, you must stand with me. But they're trying to create a moral equivalency between the fight against racism, the fight against homophobia, and the fight to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from Israel. And one of these things is not like the others. And these other communities are not buying it for the most part.
Exactly. Here we go. By the way, I have to say, in the chat, who does Bassem remind you of? You know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Robin Williams. And I know that sounds weird.
He does.
But he reminds me.
Well, he kind of resembles him, and he has
the same facial structure, but also he has that same he has the same delivery, in the sense that he has this warmth about him that Robin had, and there's this honesty about him, but at the same time just a razor sharp wit. He exudes that essence, I think. Yeah.
I agree.
It's wild.
That was my question.
Okay,
that was my question. So now, if I ask the question, can I say something on my side?
Well,
little
you've,
bit
no,
personal?
Bassem, with respect,
A little
you had
bit personal?
Bassem, with respect, I gave you half the show to have your side. Jeremy's had a lot less time. I'm going to have to
you
move
want me
on.
to leave?
Bassem,
Or do you want me to stay?
I'm going to have to let you go because we've been on air with you for 40 minutes.
Okay.
Now, all
Bye-bye.
right? But listen,
Bye-bye.
I would like to talk to you again, and
Bye-bye.
thank you for joining the program. I appreciate it.
Oh, by the way, my wife's family is all right, and they sent us a house. It's bombed. It's beautiful. It's going to be a good like Halloween theme. So
Well,
thank you.
I'm very sorry for what your family are going through in Gaza, and I mean that very sincerely.
By the way, I don't know. I don't know I don't know him. By the way, I haven't actually met them. They didn't even come to my wedding. They couldn't because they are stuck in Gaza.
Okay.
And she never saw them because Gaza is not a destination.
Bassem, as I say,
we hear their voices, and it's they
Look
die.
look at the bitch face on the side, just knowing
Yep.
that this guy
Yep.
is just like skewering him with genuinely funny while at the same time just pitch black humor. Like this is comedy at its best, is
Yep.
using
Yep.
irony and
Yep.
tragedy to make a very incisive point in a way that is genuinely, despite the unthinkably horrible circumstances under which he's making it, funny. Like it's amazing, and I encourage you. Like, we could have done the whole show on this interview. It was a half hour, and there's just so much more in it that we're not getting into. But
Well, see, yeah,
it's just amazingly done, really incredibly done.
in the end, this is the thing with these right wingers. Once you push on them like this, they're little bitches. I'm not going to say they're bigger bitches than the elite liberals. They're the same.
Yeah,
they're the same. Once you push back on their bullshit, they act exactly the same.
Exactly. They're just it's two sides of the same coin.
That's it. They want to pretty soon. They want to cancel people and they want to shut them down, and they start getting all. Look at them getting all pouty over there. I mean, it's funny because I consume a fair amount of content from over there, and they just love to take the piss out of other people, but they really can't take it at all.
No.
I don't know him, by the way. I haven't actually met them. They didn't even come to my wedding. They couldn't
Look at
because
that
they are
little
stuck
bitch.
in Gaza.
Okay.
And she never saw
look
them
at-
because Gaza is not a destination.
Bassem, as I say,
we hear their voices, and it's they die. It's fine. It's fine.
Bassem, I wish your family all the very best. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
I don't. Thank you.
That's great. I mean, amazing.
Yep.
I don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
As I say,
we hear their voices, and it's they die. It's fine. It's fine.
Bassem, I wish your family all the very best. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
I don't. Thank you.
He's just holding up a mirror to these people. You know what I mean? It's like translating how they sound to him. Yeah, you wish my family well. Why? I don't.
Why?
I don't
Right,
care.
right.
I don't care about them.
Well-
just like you don't. You don't have to pretend. Like, we don't have to do this bullshit thing
Right.
where
It's
you act like you
platitudes.
care. Yeah.
If you cared, you would demand that Israel adhere to a ceasefire right now.
Right.
If you actually cared, what do you think's going to happen to these people?
Right. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, that went absolutely mega viral, and for great reason. I mean, it was just masterfully done. Just very, very funny from the very, very beginning. Just, a lot of obviously tragic points, but, very incisive and very, very funny. He had that Robin Williams thing. He has that Robin Williams thing, that pain underneath humor,
Right.
with a certain physicality, a certain expression, but a certain honesty, a certain like genuine nature. He really has that.
Please clap.